Our guest today is Robert Dubac. I'm excited because I've met him before. I haven't seen his show, which, due to the fact that I'm not able to go back to the theater just yet, I'm going to get a DVD and I'm going to watch it that way. But I know that Charlie was very excited about it. And the show is called The Book of Moron. And you go, my God, why didn't I think of that? It's such a great title, but you want it to be yours. And this is at the moment playing at the Soho Playhouse on Van Dam Street, and it will run through October. What date, Robert?
It's actually the end of next week. We've had to close down a little early because of the Delta variant.
Oh, but, yes. Okay. All anyway. Right. Well, I'm sorry about that. I would have hoped that you could extend, but again,
yes, we were going to, but
things are opening slowly. It's very unfortunate that things are opening slowly. Well, and off Broadway especially, but a man of the theater and a man of great intellect, a social commentarian, of which there aren't enough. So, Charlie, I know you want to give the first question, so go ahead.
I did. And there are two things I noticed immediately about your show.
Sure.
One, it has absolutely nothing to do with polygamy.
No, nothing to do with the Book of Mormon. Although now look, it's, what people will say though is it is about stupidity, and some atheists will say, well, what's the difference? But,
okay. And two, it was directed by Gary Shandling, so I have to assume this has been a project that has been going on for some time.
Well, it has, obviously, and I could make a joke and say I talk to Gary every night, but it's usually in my dreams. So, and he gives me notes. But he and I were very close for a number of years before he passed away, and we had planned on doing this in New York then. But obviously, things went wrong with his life, and then obviously COVID came by. So this was just an homage to him to try to get here and show any kind of show what his work could be like from the stage.
Yeah. I actually could see a program with Gary. Gary probably would have come up with it himself, where he comes down into your dreams. That would be right, very much along the lines, I think, with his. Now, this show is your character, I should say, trying to regain your memory, and you have your inner voices. There's the voice of reason, inner moron, inner child. The two that made the biggest impression on me was. You have Common Sense, who talks like a redneck.
Yes.
And the one that I suspect is your favorite, the inner asshole.
Of course. It's everybody's favorite.
Well, they to be honest, they seem like two sides of the same coin.
They are. What's interesting, just a little backstory. The shows that I do all have characters, and I've learned over the years, there's a lot more you can say hiding behind a different character than as myself.
For example, why is it that Alabama is the only 4-syllable word people from Alabama know? Oh, we pissed off people from Alabama, didn't we?
This one character, the inner asshole, I found he's kind of this anti-woke, politically incorrect type of person, but he does it with a certain degree of intelligence. It's not, a gutter type of character. It's someone who really wants to speak his mind that nobody really wants to. I find that people nowadays, what you say is what they're thinking. They just don't have the chutzpah to say it out loud. So they'd rather have somebody else say it for them.
I didn't mention that you come out of the stand-up world as well.
Oh, sure.
I'm going to ask if that's where you met Gary and how that meeting went.
It was through stand-up, but ironically, Gary and I both had the same acting technique. I studied with Sandy Meisner, and he studied with Roy London, and we both found when we were applying that to humor that you really did need something to come from even though it was an imaginary, it had to be based in truth, and that's the best kind of humor. It's going to be funnier if it's based in truth than just normal slapstick or gutter type of jokes.
But be careful. Remember, opening the door of truth can cause serious side effects.
Okay, no problem.
The truth hurts, doesn't it?
I kind of started full bolt on this solo series at the time where nobody really was doing it that much. I think, you had some groundbreaking work with Bogosian, and obviously Lily Tomlin was doing it, but there were a few others, mainly here in the city, but around the country, not a whole lot of people. And we were in a downside in the 90s, and there was very hard to mount a show. So a solo show was very affordable. Plus, it had to be good. And mine are, where you're laughing nonstop for the whole gist of it. So I actually kind of was able to build a little traction on that around the country in all these performing arts centers. Just never got to New York, basically.
Well, you're here now.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the show is about?
Well, on this one, it's really about fighting all the hype and spin and all the lies and the illusion and everything that I've always had a sincere interest in content over image, substance over image. We get involved in fads, and we get in trends instead of what's the real gist of what's going on in culture. And a lot of that's maybe observational with stand-up comedy. But when I was doing my first show, which is called The Male Intellect, an Oxymoron, that's all about relationships. I found as I was traveling, it's interesting in America and most places that our sense of humor and how we can understand jokes has a lot to do with our intelligence. You go back to the days when Twain first started, people had a vocabulary back then, which is a lot smaller nowadays than it was back then. And I felt when I was the first show that I was doing, it's still going on actually with other actors, but as I was going through the country doing this, I actually started seeing the public have a different take on certain jokes. The jokes were still there and they were secure. They weren't timely jokes. It was more about an overall point of view. But I found the laughter either they didn't either get the joke.
And when I'm funny, am I funny all the time? Apparently not.
Or they were referencing something else, or their intelligence was lowering. So
let's use our brains here, okay? There's about 175 of us, so that's what, 100, 125 brains?
My mother used to ask me, how does anyone who doesn't live in either New York or California understand what Mel Brooks or Woody Allen are doing?
It's interesting, I found, and I don't know if you noticed or this when you saw the show this last week, the first 10 minutes of all the shows that I do are very simple. It's set up jokes, so that I can at least bring people in. It doesn't start getting smart until about 10 or 20 minutes into the show, because you have to basically
Can you time it that way? I mean, you can look at your watch and say, okay, now it's
pretty
gonna
much
get smart. Is that
I can, yes, but in the audience, I don't really, alert them. No red signs or flags that say so, but I can pretty much tell within the first 4 or 5 minutes whether it's going to take longer or shorter.
Right.
But it's written, but the writing is done specifically that way. It's dumbed down basically to start with, and then, I'm not trying to say I am saying everybody's gotten dumber, but I'm not saying they can stay dumb. I'm saying, you can drag them along on this little journey, but that you can't do on television. You can't do it anywhere else but the theater, because you have an hour and a half where you start
Right.
out stupid and get smart.
You not only do these shows yourself, you've
Mhm.
written them so that they are for actors to do as well.
Yes. Mhm. Right.
So how often are your shows being done? Or is
Well,
that
right now they're being done quite a bit over in Europe. It's they're translating different languages. The first show is all about trying to figure out, from a man's point of view, trying to figure out what women want, but trying to learn it. What I found this was when I was on the soap operas, everything men learned back then was from older men who are a generation removed. So they're giving us just bad bonehead advice. And then it's a domino effect. So each generation of men, you want them to grow up, but they never do. So that's the show that other actors do. And that's the show that's been translated to different languages, because it being a relationship show, it doesn't really, it transcends all borders. I mean, it's being done in Turkey right now and in, yeah. So, but it's been all over. It started, I think, in Scandinavian countries probably 10, 15 years ago, and it's kind of started to move now east. I think it'll probably stop right as we get to the Middle East. I don't think it'll go much further than Turkey.
Well, if it goes to Turkey, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's,
it
you
is.
know,
Yeah.
you're right in the middle
This
of
is
that.
kind of your vagina monologues.
Yes, exactly. And it is.
No, I get it. I just was stunned by hearing Charlie use that word.
Use the
that's
word
all.
vagina.
Yes.
I normally just say V monologues. but-
Yes, the V monologues. You know, it's funny because when the mailing first came out, it was a few years prior to the vagina monologues, and I was in parts of the country where they still wouldn't publish that word.
Okay.
I mean, that's how they got it. It was talk about a great publicity stunt.
You have a show called Stand Up Jesus. Now
Yes.
that I have to know about. What is that one about?
Well, I'm kind of going back to my the stand-up roots, and it basically is exactly what it sounds like. Jesus comes back. He's a stand-up comedian because he realized last time he was here, when you preach without punchlines, you get crucified. So, I mean, and that's the essence of the humor of it. So it's not as much blasphemous as it's a guy who, if he were to come back, he'd say, you guys have gotten a lot of this wrong. Let's kind of set the record straight.
Wow, I love it.
It's all metaphorical. You don't take things down to be black and white. And so I'm anxious to do it. And I'm actually, to be honest, I'm more anxious to do it in the Bible Belt where I'll get tar and feathered because
Whoa.
I'll probably get a little better publicity down there. Interestingly enough, that what I learned with my shows in Europe, they play at the one in Hungary's been playing, Budapest has been playing for 4 years now. But they only do like one show a month and it runs at a certain time slot. It's almost like in Las Vegas, but that's the way theater is over in Europe. So I'm wondering if that will eventually happen here because of the expense of a show.
Shows
Right.
are playing at different time
are,
slots.
right.
It used to be 8 o'clock. Matinee were 2 or 3 o'clock, generally 2 on Wednesdays, I think 3 on Sundays.
Yeah.
It is it's gotten a lot more confusing, I think.
It is, and that confusion is probably gonna get worse before it gets better. But I think once it gets leveled out, it's going to, unless you have a huge arts program in this country that takes care of the flack, this is the only way to make it financially, workable.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. I know that you're going to be, your show runs Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right?
Yes, and actually we've done real well. We're kind of sold out on. We've got Friday and Sunday this next week that are still tickets available. So Friday at 9 o'clock, talking about your time frames that are different. Right. Friday at 9 o'clock and then Sunday at 3 o'clock. We still have some.
And it's the Book of Moron.
Yes.
So you can see it, catch this run.
Love
Hopefully,
the title.
we
Just
hope you'll
love
be
it.
back.
Yes.
But if you can't see it live, you can get the DVD.
Oh, that's true. You can go on the website and get it's just my name, robertdubac.com.
See you again.
So a
Take
rather intelligent moron. Robert, thank you so
Oh,
much.
thanks very much.
Appreciate you coming on.
That's a good oxymoron.
If I parallel park in a parallel universe, will I be double parking? If I call you Bobby, I've known you since you were an inner child, Bobby. Want to figure out who you are, what you believe, the inner you. You got to start with the outer you first. That's just good old common sense. You start with the outer you, and you use a little critical thought. You still got critical thought, don't you? I don't know why my common sense sounds like a redneck, but he makes sense. Start with the obvious, use critical thought. All right, then. Well, obviously I can read, so I'm not a child left behind. But I'm reading a newspaper, so I got to be what, over 50? So if this is the inside of my brain, here's my first question. How'd you get in here?
Just don't forget to close the door behind you. We can't expose anyone to the truth who's not ready for it.
Why not?
Because it offends people. And when people get offended by the truth, they have the tendency to burn you as a witch. Off you go, and good luck.
Wow.